speak now to our senior politics reporter, Ziyanda Ngcobo, who has been in attendance inside court. Ziyanda, give us your sense as to what the reaction has been inside court, the special plea application by the former president dismissed.
Certainly, Xoli, you would have heard Judge Bedgun dismissing that application by the former president, citing what he's previously said even during a similar ruling to that of the permanent stay of prosecution, that the issues that have been raised by the former president need to be dealt with during the trial and by the court, and are not applicable to Section 1061H of the Criminal Procedures Act. So far, we know that the matter is adjourned shortly, just so that there can be a discussion of with the teams, especially Thales, who are the former president's co-accused, about a way forward, in particular a trial date. Judge Bedgun, you would have heard him saying that this matter has been hanging around for too long and that there needs to be some sort of finality. As you've already mentioned, Xoli, he dealt quite specifically with regards to the issue of the title to prosecute, and that in this particular regard, I'm sorry, Xoli, I'm just turning around because I'm trying to locate the NPA's Mthunzi Maga, who is also inside court with us today. But going back to the issue of the title to prosecute, basically saying that it doesn't really matter whether or not the prosecutor is impartial or lacks independence. What matters is whether or not the accused will receive a fair trial. In fact, he quoted a Supreme Court of Appeal ruling, Xoli, which he says is binding on him, in which a similar case was raised, and that it was decided that that would be the way forward.
Talk to us, Ziyanda, about the complaint around the physical examination of the former president, in particular by doctors that would have been appointed by the state. What is the judge's position in that regard?
I mean, very clear there, Xoli, from Judge Bedgun. He referred to his judgment. It was in August. You recall that in July, the former president was incarcerated as a result of that constitutional court ruling. His legal team requested a postponement. The matter was moved to the 10th of August. When the matter then continued on the 10th of August, his health then came into question. And this is when Judge Bedgun handed down an order which said, Xoli, that the Zuma's legal team must submit a medical record of the former president, but if the NPA is not satisfied or feels that they would like to send their own doctor, they are allowed to do so. And says, in fact, his judgment was very confirmatory. It actually was an obligation. It wasn't something that was up for discussion, in essence. That's what Judge Bedgun said. So this issue of the NPA's doctors examining the former president, that they unlawfully tried to do so, basically Judge Bedgun saying that that is actually not true, because his judgment was very specific as to how matters would unfold. He said it's in paragraph 284 of his written judgment. Right now, he just gave a summary of his judgment at this particular point in time, and he says the reasons have been outlined there, but it was very clear on the 10th of August. In fact, Dalimpofu, Zuma Senior Counsel, committed to that during those virtual hearings, saying that they would allow the NPA to do so. There was at some stage an issue with regards to the former president's medical records, where they also accused Downer of leaking them to the media, where in fact it was just the military defense doctor who in essence just said that the former president suffers from a terminal illness that would take months for him to recover from. And this is where the dispute comes, because the NPA's doctor said he was fit to stand for trial.
Ziyanda, I see there's some movement behind you, so while we continue to talk, maybe you might want to also try and position yourself in case there is some commentary, particularly from the NPA's side. I'm sure they'll be eager to give commentary at this time, but the issue that you touched on now, Ziyanda, the last issue around the former president's medical records, might that be the reference that the judge was talking about when he spoke about the irregularities that were not so much that they could derail this particular case?
Well, Xoli, let me just try and steal the Mthunzi Maga. He's speaking here, and let's see what he has to say.
Of course, we welcome the judgment because, remember, it has reaffirmed our argument that the issue of political interference and bias was pronounced by two courts, the Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein and the full court that was sitting here hearing the permanent stay of prosecution by Mr. Zuma. And now this is the third judgment that reaffirms our position, because throughout our argument, we were saying we don't know why they are rehashing the same argument that was dismissed at the SCA and by the full court here that had the permanent stay. So we welcome the judgment, we feel vindicated, and we are ready to proceed to call our first witness. We just hope that there will be no more delays, because this has been quite a protracted process that at least now needs to come to an end.
When you say you're ready for trial here, Advocate Billy Downer saying, well, you are ready in the next 2 to 3 weeks, but there is the issue with the Thales representative from abroad.
That is an issue that is being discussed now during the adjournment. After the adjournment, we hope that they will come with a date when we can resume with the proceedings.
But in terms of logistics, in all honesty, do you think 2 to 3 weeks will be enough, will be sufficient for you to commence with the trial?
My understanding is that you are saying in 2 to 3 weeks, not that we will have to roll it out or set it down for 2 to 3 weeks.
Mr. Maka, are you at all concerned about the charges that have now been opened against Mr. Downer, in particular when it comes to casting aspersions on his character, that every time then he stands and tries to lead this particular case, they will always raise the issue of the fact that he's currently being investigated by the authorities?
My understanding is that these were two issues, that the special plea which has been dispensed with, and then the issue of the charges. No decision has been taken to prosecute Mr. Downer yet. The matter is still with the police. However, it will be objectively dealt with by the DPP office in Pietermaritzburg. So it has no bearing on his performing his duties as a prosecutor in this case, because the issue of the special plea, where they were challenging his title to prosecute, has been dispensed with.
And I suppose the other complication, or maybe it's not a complication, you can help me here, is the fact that Mr. Downer is due for retirement. If, for an example, Mr. Zuma's legal team decides to bring forward another application, maybe take this to the Supreme Court of Appeal, are you concerned that your lead prosecutor may not actually be around by the time this trial actually gets underway?
I am not going to get into the issue of his retirement, but I can assure you and the nation that Mr. Downer will see this matter through.
All right, well, that's Mthunzi Maga saying that Billy Downer will see this matter through, so not wanting to be drawn on his issues of retirement. But of course, Xoli, we know that Billy Downer is one man who would know the ins and outs of this case from nearly 2 decades ago. He's someone who successfully prosecuted Shabir Sheikh in 2004. He's someone who knows and has actually had to, at some stage in his career, wait and not be able to take on other cases while this matter is still trying to be finalized. And of course, we know, Xoli, that this special plea has now been dismissed, saying that the case against Billy Downer will have no impact as far as they're concerned as the NPA.
The NPA also very clear through Advocate Maga there that they are ready to call their first witness and that they hope there is not going to be any further delays. Do we know whether Patricia de Lille would still be that first witness?
Well, I don't know if she's the first witness, but she's definitely one of the witnesses that the NPA plans to call in this trial. You would have heard Maga saying that within 2 to 3 weeks, they are ready to go. In fact, part of the reason why we adjourned for about 20 minutes is that they're going to try and get in contact with the legal representative of Thales. Advocate Barry Roo was, in fact, the senior counsel who we last saw representing Thales when they were in court the last time. You'll know that the company company is based in France, so they would need to check whether or not they'd have a representative available soon enough to come to South Africa and be able to stand as a co-accused alongside former President Jacob Zuma. But in terms of the logistics, you heard Mark also responding to that to say they don't see any problems, and also considering, Toli, that now we're on lockdown level 1, the possibilities are quite plenty at this particular point in time for this trial to get underway. In fact, as we speak, Toli, this matter was set down for 2 terms. We're currently in the 2nd term, so this would have been the 2nd term of the actual trial. But of course, we know because of the application, new dates need to be set, an exchange of diaries and availability of the lawyers would have to be referred to. But I suspect, Toli, that Zuma's legal team may want to first study the judgment as indicated already by Tabani Masuku, saying then they will decide what they do thereafter.
Ziyanda, one of the other elements here that was quite crucial, which hinged on whether Billy Downer would either stay or go, if he was told by the courts that he could no longer stay on this particular matter, the former president then would have had his chance to say, quash this case, because this is what he has been arguing for the longest time. Is it fair to assume that with the judge saying that this case must go to trial, chances of trying to have a stay of prosecution are now next to nil?
Absolutely. It's basically a reaffirmation of the permanent stay of prosecution, Oli. And in fact, you would have heard part of Wim Trengov's arguments is that this is just a regurgitation of an application that has already been dismissed before. The arguments that are being made are not new. And in fact, if there are critical issues such as the ones of impartiality and independence, there's an opportunity during the trial when you're presenting evidence to actually lead that evidence as a part of boosting your trial. So, part of the exasperation that was expressed by the NPA's lawyers is to say you're trying to conduct a trial within a trial when in actual fact a lot of the issues that you're trying to ventilate, there is space and room once the trial has begun to actually do so. And so in essence, you would have also heard Judge Piet saying this matter has been going on for long. So there actually needs to be some sort of a date that is set down, that there's some sort of progress that's been made. And if there isn't any other further application brought, let's bring the first witness and let's get the show on the road.
Ziyanda, the reaction from the gallery there as you sat in the benches when the judge made it clear that this special plea is dismissed. The look on the former president's face, I couldn't quite make out because, he has a mask on, but I could tell that he is disappointed. What about others that are sitting on the bench and are there to support the former president?
Well, look, I'll tell you, Toli, that those who are here today, it's a far cry from what we usually see. The only person I've spotted in as far as the ANC is concerned is the current health MEC of KwaZulu-Natal and a PEC member in the KZN ANC. That's Nomakoko Smelane. Zuma's daughter, Duduzile Zuma Sambodla, is also here today, but not the usual numbers in terms of political figures and others from the RET champions, formations and coach here today. Dead silence. I think there was an element of just trying to take in what Judge Piet has said, and I presume that there would be some sort of wanting to actually get the reasoning behind the judgment, which is not what Judge Piet did. He gave us just a summary. I wasn't able to see the former president. I was sitting behind him, and so I wouldn't have been able to see his facial expression, but I can tell you from the gallery, it was mostly filled with journalists today, not quite the usual suspects, if I could put it that way, in the gallery this morning.
Ziyanda Ngcobo, let's leave it there for the time being. Let's get a sense of what is happening outside court too. of our colleagues, Diane Hawker and Karinda Jagmohan, are outside court. Let's see if we can get a hold of at least one of them. Karinda Jagmohan, if you can hear us, what is the situation outside?
Indeed, while analysts on the ground, some of the supporters that have gathered outside are all reacting to what's happened now. We hear that this judgment is essentially handed down. We understand that Billy Dana will remain as prosecutor in this case, but we've got a political analyst with us, Mpumelelo Zikalala. Thank you for speaking to us. What next for Zuma now? I mean, you said that you weren't essentially shocked by this. It was something you were expecting. But are there any avenues that the former president can take going forward to appeal what has already been handed down here?
There definitely are. You still have the Supreme Court of Appeals. You still have the Court in which he can go to and simply say, the judge, when delivering his judgment, was very clear that I'm bound by the decision of this court. And I can see that in order for it to change, it has to start here. But most importantly, the final arbiter in all things, or all things that are legal in South Africa, is the Court. So we need a decision to finalize this particular matter once and for all, in terms of assessing can or should the conduct of the prosecutor be extended to his title to prosecute. If that's the case, what are the factors that should have been looked at? Let's also remember, I think it's part 3 of Judge Spoon's judgment, in which he then says, I've then explored all the other avenues of the alternative when it comes to this particular process, and even the wider interpretation of that particular definition of the title to prosecute. He was basically saying, this is my arbiter. This is my indirect view of what is going to take place at a later stage. Should you go and appeal this matter at a later stage? So it is definitely worth taking it up if the former president is going to say, I'm not satisfied. I feel that a different court, the Supreme Court of Appeals, can come to a different conclusion. But most importantly, let the Constitutional Court deal with this matter. There's an instance of saying my Section 35 rights versus something that I feel wasn't done correctly, versus someone who ought to be aligned or force his allegiance to the NPA only, who has conducted himself in a manner in which I feel is contrary to that particular conduct. What can I do in order to protect my rights? We would need a decision of the Court in this one.
So now, as we await the break to end, trial dates are going to be discussed.
All right, Karinda Jagmohan, we're going to quickly step away from you. We see the Zuma Foundation spokesperson, Mzaleni Manye, is talking.
Foundation will be advising, in fact, that President Zuma must appeal because we think this is a travesty of justice.
All right, that's the spokesperson of the Zuma Foundation.